Castle Raisers has a Three Little Pigs theme, but it combines drafting, action selection, and attacking your opponents in a game that's definitely not for kids. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald. In this episode, we are going to talk about a brand new game from the folks at Wonderful World Board Games. And stay tuned at the end of the video. I'm going to talk a little bit about a documentary I saw with the director Q&A. I got to meet the director, Simon Ennis, of The Hobby, Tales from the Tabletop. So I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the video. But most importantly, we're going to talk about Castle Raisers today from Wonderful World Board Games. This is a brand new game. It's got a Three Little Pigs theme, but it's not a game for kids at all. And it's a game I know that they're showing off at Gen Con, actually, so that's why I'm talking about it now. Castle Raisers is a game, a great looking game actually, for 1 to 4 players. There are solo rules. You can play it co-op or you can play it competitively, and we played competitively, of course. It's a game that only takes about 45 minutes to play. Kids aged 10 and up can figure this game out. But like I said, the adults that I played with really thought this was more advanced than we expected given the theme. Let's take a deeper look at Castle Raisers from Wonderful World Board Games. Before I get into the meat of the game, I wanted to show you the box. The organizer in this box is fantastic. Everything fits perfectly. You've got castle walls that you're going to be building, fortifications. There's a spot for cards. I took the score pad out. The score pad fits right on top of these tokens, but there's a space for everything. The box closes. All the player boards fit right over here. So the setup is pretty easy on this one. And then you just organize things into stacks before you tear it down and put everything back in the box. Everything fits and the box closes, which I always like in my board games. Castle Raisers is light to moderate in terms of its complexity. It's not a super complicated game in terms of the rule set, but there are strategic options here. Each player is going to start with a player board. You're going to start with a drafting market over here. You get one villager from this market on this side that's going to go on your pig spot at the top of your board in the forest section. You might be able to see, I'm not sure how well these lines will show up on the camera, but you've got this starting spot where you're going to put your first villager, and the board is divided into sections. And you've got a farmland section, a forest section, and an ocean section, and you're going to score each of those sections at the end of the game. It is a game where you're trying to earn the most prestige points, or victory points, I guess. You're going to earn points through having villagers that give points for certain conditions on your player board. You're going to lose points, though, based on how many wolves are getting into your castle. And there are some other ways that you can lose points as well. There's a little bit of asymmetry. It's not too asymmetrical, these boards, but all of the boards have a slightly different layout around the castle in terms of what actions will be activated when you place walls on different spots. But really, that's what you're doing in this game. On your turn, you're going to draft one of these walls, place it on your castle, and then take an action based on the icons that you're covering up. Keeping with the Three Little Pigs theme, you're playing this game over 3 ages. And the first one is straw, the second one is wood, and the third one is brick or stone. And that's what you're putting on your castle. All of these walls have icons on them. And in the game, what's going to happen is when an icon gets covered up, that's an action that you get to take. And then at the end of the era, once all of these, at the end of an age, pardon me, once all of these tiles are gone, then you do get to activate one more thing before you shut everything down and restart for the next era. Starting with the last player, you're going to draft one of these villagers. And the villagers on that first round, they don't get replaced after they're drafted. So the first player is going to have the fewest options to choose from, and that gives the last player a little bit of a bonus. Each of these villager tiles includes, at the top, some sort of a bonus action. So in the case of the red ones, you're getting some extra attack value there. And the bottom part is all about victory points. So this token is going to give you 3 victory points for every tile with a green border in that same section. One of the things that I liked about all of these player boards is that you've got these hexes that are on the borderline between two sections, and a tile placed there. I mean, you can't place the first one there because it has to go on the pig, but a tile placed there applies its bonus to both zones. So that really can multiply up the victory points if you're careful about where you're putting those villagers. Everybody gets to draft that one villager to put into their player board, but you're also pulling some wolves who are going to be attacking you at the end of the game. And honestly, at the end of each age, you get a bit of an attack depending on which wolves are in each area of your board. So you've got this big bag with these wolf tokens. Now, there are four different kinds of wolves in here. You've got kind of an uber wolf who has a shield. I don't know if you'll be able to see this guy. He's got sort of a shield, and he's harder to take out. You've got to dump kettles of hot soup on these wolves to get rid of them, and this guy requires two of those kettles in order for him to be removed from the board. And when the wolves get removed from the board, they go back in the bag. So you're not going to ever run out of wolves that are going to be attacking your castle. The archer wolves are one of the most dangerous wolves in the game. So these archers with the red border around them, they have a bow and arrow. And at the end of each age, you're going to count up how many are left, how many you didn't remove from the board. You're going to take an arrow token and put it beside your player board. Each arrow token at the end of the game is a -1 victory point. So you're counting those up and you're losing a point for each one of those. So you want to get rid of those wolves if you can. Finally, you've got these ladder wolves, these guys carrying a little ladder. What's keeping wolves out of your castle at the end of the game, so you're not really being attacked except by the archers throughout each round, but at the end of the game, you're going to be looking at how high your walls are and how many more wolves there are. So the wolves are almost climbing over each other to get into your castle. Each wall will remove one wolf, but every extra wolf after that is going to get in. That's a problem when you've got these ladder wolves, because ladder wolves can get over your walls no matter what. All of the wolves in that section are going to go if one of the wolves has a ladder. So you really want to make sure you get rid of these ladder guys by the end of the game, and you're trying to take out the archers earlier on so that you're not losing those victory points with the bow and arrow. So your initial setup is going to look something like this, and you've got a first player token that's this big, this is the mother pig. This is how you know who the first player is, but this is going to get passed around through the game. And it is, honestly, it's really important to get that first player token for a number of reasons. We're going to talk about that. So on your turn, you're going to draft one of these walls that comes off the board. It does not get replenished until everyone has done their drafting. So we played a 3-player game. Well, we played some 3-player games. I haven't played at a 4-player count yet. I didn't play the solo. I didn't play cooperative. I wanted to get used to this game as a competitive kind of a battle because I've played other castle defense games that are cooperative. This one is, I really like the competitive version here. So the first player gets a choice of 4 of these things. And often what we were trying to do when we first started playing this game was get lots of those kettles of soup, because you're going to be able to get rid of some of the wolves by pouring soup on them. And we'll talk about that. But there's no soup in this case. You've got these icons on here. There's an attack icon. There's this little hexagon, and that means you can draft one of the villagers and put them into your town. There's an icon that indicates you're going to take the first player token. When you do that, you also get this little prestige token, which is worth two prestige points, pardon me. I was going to say victory points at the end of the game. Finally, there's an icon where you can add fortifications, which I'll show you. Those are pretty interesting too. So I draft a wall, I place that somewhere on my player board. Now, it is a situation where it reminded me a little bit of Legos, honestly, because you've got to cross a gap here between two walls. And you'll see when I build up the walls a little bit more how that works. But you're kind of staggering these pieces. So I can't put a piece right here because that's all in the same area. You've got a little line that you can see maybe on each of these walls. And that's going to line up with a line here or a gap between two walls that you've already placed. But at the beginning, of course, there are no walls. At the beginning also, there are few icons. So you're only able to take one action because you take an action by covering an icon. So if I place this here, I've covered an attack icon, and that means I'm going to get to attack. You're not choosing one player to attack. All of your opponents are going to put wolves onto their board when you do that attack token. You're sending wolves to attack the other players. So I've covered up this icon. I'm going to get an attack. I've got a villager here who adds an attack icon as well. And then in the middle, we have kind of this wildcard space that applies to each of the different sections of the board. So that's a third attack icon. So if I place this wall right here, I'm going to get to attack. I draw one of these little attack tokens, and on the back it shows, oh, people are going to have to put wolves into their farm section. This little attack token, it goes in the section where I place the wall, and then players are going to have to draw wolves from the bag. Each opponent, in this case, because I have 3 of those attack icons, has to draw 3 wolves and put them all in their farm. So now all of a sudden on the first turn, they don't just have 2 wolves over here, they've got 5, and I don't have to draw any. If I had placed it over here, I'm covering up the fortifications icon, and that gives me one of these pieces. These pieces really serve a single purpose, and that's to build your walls higher. Remember, at the end of the game, it's the number of wolves that exceed the height of your walls that are going to get into your castle. So these are just making your walls higher. They don't activate any ability. I don't have to put these right next to where I place my wall, but maybe I'll decide to do that because when I place the second layer, it has to be flat. So I can't put a second wall like this because it's not balanced. It doesn't have anything to support it. But now I could put a wall over here and cover up that icon instead. If I were to cover this piece right here that has the pig icon on it, I get the first player token. Now I already have it because I'm the only one here telling you about the game, but I get the first player token and I get one of these prestige tokens as well. So you're at the end of the game, you're going to have little stacks in each zone depending on where you place the walls and whether you're attacking or you're taking the first player marker. And these attack icons are going to be worth, at the end of the game, 3 points each. Some of the villagers will increase the value of the attack tokens or increase the value of those prestige tokens, they're called. I always want to call them pig tokens because they have pigs on the front. So the most powerful option for me right now is to place my wall here and take that attack action because I have that extra icon that forces everybody to draw an extra wolf. So everyone else except for me is going to have 5 wolves on the farm side of their board. And then the next player has only 3 of these walls to choose from. And in our 3-player games, the final player is choosing between 2. The 4th one gets discarded, and then you replenish the board. Once the last tile is placed, when you've drafted everything from here and there's no tiles left to put into the marketplace, well, then you're going to do that upkeep for the end of the era. Your board might look something like this. I've taken a couple of attacks. I've used a couple of kettles of soup to get rid of some of those wolves that are attacking me. And then you're going to do 2 things before you replenish the board with the, well, in this case, you're going to be using wood. You're going to do 2 things. The first is you're looking for face-up kettles because you're going to get to activate the ones that are on your wall if they're visible. So anything that's showing that has a kettle, you're going to get rid of you're going to potentially be able to get rid of a wolf. So I'm looking around here, I don't have anything in the forest. So these 4 wolves are going to stay as is. Over here I do have one that's showing. I've got a couple of wolves here that would require 2. I don't have 2. So I can get rid of this wolf though, because I've got 1 kettle of soup that's showing that'll eliminate him from the board. And importantly, I've got one in the ocean section where there's an archer. So instead of taking an arrow and taking -1 victory point, this guy is gone. But if there had been an archer up here, I would have to take this little arrow, and this arrow would go right beside my player board, and that's going to remind me at the end of the game I have to take off 1 victory point. When the game's finally over, I might have a castle that looks something like this. So once you've done that final end of the age and you've counted up your exposed soup and gotten rid of the wolves that are surrounding, like there probably honestly would be more than this in an actual game, but I just kind of grabbed some pieces and put them together based on how I was building the wall. But I've got several wolves over here coming in from the sea. I've only got a few in the forest and a few in the farmland. So once everything's been calculated and you've got your little arrow tokens here, then you're going to start to look at victory points. You're going to begin by counting up how many wolves in each zone are entering into the castle. So in this case, I have quite a high wall. It's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers high, and I've only got 2 wolves on that side. So these guys don't get through. They're not going to cost me any victory points, but if there had been 6, one of those wolves would have gotten through, and then I'd be looking at the other players to see who had the most. One of the important things when you're building your castle to recognize is that it's the highest wall in a section is what you're counting. So even though I have a lower one on this side that's only 4 high, it's the highest wall is the one that's going to dictate, well, how high the wall is, so, and how many wolves are going to get through. I've blocked off these wolves as well. They're not going anywhere, but here I have too many. So my wall on this side is 1, 2, 3, 4 layers high. I've got 5 wolves, so one of those guys is going to get through. Potentially, I'm going to lose some points. Now, in the rule set that came in the box, you are going to lose 3 points for each wolf that got through. In the online, most up-to-date PDF of the rules, instead, you're looking for who has the most wolves, and the person with the most in a section is going to lose 10 points. The second most loses 5, but the third one doesn't lose any. You're carrying out that process for the 3 sections. Then you're counting up your negatives from these arrows. So you're going to lose some points there as well. But then you get to add some points. How many of these prestige tokens do you have? 2 points each. You get, like I said earlier, 3 points for each of those attacks. And I had stacked up some attack icons underneath the wall here. You can't see them now because they're all covered. One way that players earned a lot of points in the games that we played is that you then look for your highest section of wall, count up how high it is, and you multiply that number by 5, and you get that many bonus points for having one really high section. Finally, you look in here at the village and you see how many points you earn from these guys. So I'm going to get 3 points for each green, so I've got 2 of those. I'm going to get 5 points if there are no wolves, and here in the forest there are no wolves, so that's 5 extra points on that section. I'm also going to get 2 points for each, because this is on the border, for each of the attack tiles that I have on my board in these 2 sections. So that's going to give me a whole bunch of points. Here I get 2 points, 2 additional points for the height of the wall in that section, a couple of points in this section for each of the prestige tokens, and I've got 3 over there. So you're adding up a bunch of points at the end. It's not really a point salad. There's only a few ways that you're going to earn them, and you do have this scoring pad here that you can total things up. One of the things about the scoring pad, there's not a place for totals. I had to add everything up and write it on top. And that's the game. The player with the most points wins, and then you sort everything out and maybe you play another game. The time estimate on the box was pretty good. I think our first game took maybe only about an hour, and we were still learning the game. So the box says 45 minutes. That seems about right for me. And when we were playing with 3 players, which is the play count that I worked at, yeah, about 45 minutes for a game. So that was a pretty accurate estimate, which is great for a game that still gives you these strategic choices. And there's no soups that would be helpful, so I'm going to attack.
Oh no!
That's not ideal.
So how many is that getting attacked by?
You are getting attacked by 4.
Oh my god!
And they are going to blue.
Oh, no!
That's worst case scenario.
Jesus, Murphy.
4 going to blue, and then I think I'm reinforcing, and that's what I'm going to get. And
Yeah,
I
right.
get only 2 reinforcements, but they're going on the ocean side. I almost wish there was another round so you could make it higher, just because it's cool to make those things a little bit taller. It's just it's a neat game with some strategy, but it's very quick. What skills, though, are you practicing when you play a game like Castle Razors? Well, there is a spatial element to it, so there is some visual spatial reasoning for 2 reasons. Because, well, one is you're planning out how to stack your walls so that you're covering up the icons that you want. And so really you're thinking ahead to the next turn. You're covering up that turn to take those actions, and then you're thinking, what will I be able to do on the next turn based on where I place that wall? You know, in this case, I've got an attack and some reinforcement tokens, or some reinforcement walls that I can build to make things a little bit taller. So there's some spatial reasoning, some visual spatial planning here. You've got some pattern recognition too, because you're creating these patterns with the villagers within your castle so that you can maximize the points there as well. So there's the spatial puzzle of that, and then there's the patterns on the inside where you want to make sure you're going to earn as many points as possible. You only get so many of those villagers in the game. And of course, because you do have to plan ahead, the walls that you place are really the actions that you're going to be taking next turn as well. When you're budgeting those walls and you're planning out where you're going to put them so that you can take the actions in the next turns that you'd like to do, you have to make sure things are staggered so that you can so that it's flat and you can actually take the actions that you want. And whenever you're planning ahead like that, we are talking about those executive functioning skills, those behaviors that you need to work towards a goal. And you've got a few goals here that you're working towards. And this is what I think makes this, even though it's such a kid's theme, it makes it a more strategic game because you're working on defending yourselves against the wolves, maybe making sure that you don't take too many arrows that are going to cause you to lose points, planning out these guys in the middle to maximize those points, planning out your actions to make sure things are flat that you can put another wall on and take those actions. There's lots of things that you can plan. So you've got your immediate goal of what action do I want to take? You've got your short-term goal of now what actions am I going to have available to me? Do I have enough kettles of soup, for example, to make sure that I can take out some of those wolves to get those 5 points at the end of the game? And then there's the long-term goal of the victory points. And again, making sure that your castle's not overrun because you've got some ladders up there that are going to let everyone in. Final thoughts, though, about Castle Raisers. Well, this was a game that surprised us, like all of us around the table. I looked at the box and the artwork is cute. I didn't know when it was sent to me that this was a Three Little Pigs themed game. It just talked about drafting and building castles, and the pictures look neat on the web. So when I agreed to review it, I wasn't even really aware that the Three Little Pigs theme was in there. So it's kind of maybe that's a downside, really. It's got a theme that looks like it's for kids, but we were so surprised that there was enough decision making there and strategy that it was really an interesting game for the grown-ups. So it's not really a kids game, even though it looks that way. You've got the tactile presence of building these walls and then the stack that you're creating. So the components are fun too. And then the combinations here of the actions that you're taking, because you're trying to set things up. Your walls are always covering up two spaces at the beginning of the game. They only cover one icon, but your walls are always covering two spaces. So you're setting up combos for later turns. And that's a good mechanism. And with the short and the long-term goals, with the wolves attacking, we really like that. One of the things that I really thought was clever and fun about this game is that, and maybe this is better for the younger kids, is that you're not choosing a person to attack if you take that attack action. Everybody's going to be groaning that you did it, but you're not directly attacking the other players or choosing one person and singling them out. Everybody's drawing from the bag, and then they're almost seeing it as their own bad luck if they draw an archer or if they draw. It's not because you did it to them, because they're drawing them from the bag. So it's a good, like it almost depersonalizes the take that element of the game. And your excuse is, well, I want those 3 victory points at the end. I had to cover that up. Or I wanted to make sure that I put a soup in that section, so I had to cover that icon. And, there's lots of reasons why you might do it, but you're not targeting an individual player. So we thought that was a good, like a good mechanism that I hadn't seen. I don't think I've seen that in too many other games. So you've got the drafting and the importance of the first player. Like you're definitely getting more choices, but we always found, oh my gosh, there's one certain thing that I want, and there might only be one tile with that icon on it. So you really did want to be early in the turn order in order to have those options. So um, those prestige tokens that give you 2 points, it does give you those 2 points, but then you've got your main benefit during the game is that you get first choice of the tiles that are there in the marketplace. So it was a satisfying playthrough. You've got We did run out of villagers in the three-player games that we played, so there might be one stack where sometimes we were really focusing on the kettles and making sure that we had enough to get rid of the wolves that were attacking us because we were very worried about that. A lot of the time we'd run out of these attack ones, and then there wouldn't be any left, so you couldn't draft those ones. But it is like this combination of mechanisms where you're drafting, you're defending, you're attacking the other players, and then you're earning victory points in a number of different ways with those villagers. This was an interesting game that I think has some replayability. I do want to play it again. I'm interested in playing it with a different group and maybe seeing what the four-player game looks like in terms of the amount of time that gets added when you have a fourth player. But I mean, you're drafting, you're placing, you're taking those two actions, and then the next player goes. So it's usually fairly quick. Um, w- I mean, I found the rule book in the box to be confusing. So I had the PDF. I mostly focused on the wolves, but I know there were in the original rule book, at least the one that came in the box that I was sent, had some numbers that didn't add up for me in terms of the examples on the board. Like, were they counting the icons in the middle all of the time in each example? They didn't always do that, and that made it confusing. And then you have to wonder, wait, what's happening here? There were some times where we weren't always sure, well, is this icon on the forest side or the farm side? Because the lines here kind of go right through one of the icons on your wall. So sometimes you're placing something right on that spot. You're sort of, which side is this on? So so we had a little bit of figuring out to do with the original rule book, but the new rule book does make some tweaks and hopefully make some things a little bit more clear. Like I said, I didn't read through the whole second rule book a second time to figure those things out. This is a game that you could it really is like an entry point, I think, for these kinds of drafting tile placement games, because you've got the approachable theme maybe for folks who aren't really gamers, but you've got this building element here that's fun. You've got a certain number of icons, but it's not overwhelming, I don't think. And then you're doing one thing, and that gives you two actions that you can take, and then the next player goes. So it's a straightforward game. And as I said, we were surprised. I was not expecting this to be a game for grown-ups, but it was a fun game for grown-ups. A good filler game because it's not too long, that you could have in between some heavier Euros, for example. But there's a good example of tile placement and building up a tableau within your little castle, satisfying in terms of stacking things up and how that works. We enjoyed Castle Raisers, so thanks so much to the folks at WWBG for sending this game my way. Very best of luck at Gen Con. And I hope you're able to demo this to a whole bunch of people because, as I said, it was quite a surprise to us. Now, before I wrap things up, though, I do want to talk just a little bit about the hobby, Tales from the Tabletop. Now, this was it's about a 90-minute long documentary, and it's touring around, right now it's touring around Canada to some theaters, and the director's coming along and doing a Q&A at the end. So as soon as this was announced, I bought a couple of tickets, and my friend and I were going to go, and then Vortex Media sent me a couple of tickets. So I was able to bring a few friends along, one of whom was not a gamer. So three of us are board game players, and the fourth one is not. So we went to see this thing. I wasn't sure what to expect. I was looking forward to seeing some of the designers that I know, some designers I've met since I started the channel, and hearing people say nice things about games. I wasn't sure at all what this thing was going to be what this movie was going to look like. But what a pleasure it was to see this thing. I mean, it was awesome to meet the director, Simon Ennis. Like, that was fun and fantastic, and to hear him talk about the process of creating the movie, to be able to ask him questions. But it was also just, this was a documentary about joy, and you don't see too many of those. There wasn't any real, I mean, there's some drama, right? Because people are competing, and there's some scenes about a big competition. I won't spoil anything. But you're just learning about the process of designing board games. You're hearing about how people got into the career and what people were saying with their first design. Elizabeth Hargrave is in this one, along with Daryl Andrews and Eric Lang. It was just a movie about the hobby that we all enjoy so much, and I walked out of that theater with a smile on my face. The credits rolled and people were applauding in the movie theater, which you don't hear for every movie. So what a great time we had seeing this thing. I mean, it was just a happy experience. It's coming to video on demand towards the end of the month, July 22nd, I think, and it's touring in the meantime. But if you're a fan of board games, this is a movie that I think you'd enjoy, even if you're not a fan of board games. Like I said, my buddy who's a psychologist who actively dislikes board games, he came to see this thing and walked out saying, "Wow, that it even gave him kind of an appreciation for the hobby." We're talking afterwards about work versus play, and are you playing a game if you're just working to win? But then there's the self-actualization and finding your talent and the art of these games and the fact that you're spending your time with friends, but you're creating an experience as opposed to Tom Bassel, it was in the film as well, saying instead of sitting around and talking, you're creating an experience. So the movie was a great experience. I really did enjoy it, and I'd recommend it to anyone who's a fan. But even if you're not a fan, if you like documentaries, Simon Ennis did a good job here. I'm looking forward to his next film. So thanks to Vortex Media for sending the extra tickets. That's why my friend Giuseppe was able to come along with us. But if you have questions about the hobby, if you have questions about castle raisers, if you have questions or suggestions for Brains on Games, you can, of course, leave them in the comment section below the video, or you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go. Previous ones are already up there. Brains on Games is the X handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed and the Blue Sky feed. We're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video, you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.